and then you're talking. Some of that got through to me.
Today is the anniversary of a precious moment in this nation's history. It is 48 years since the Voting Rights Act was signed into law by President Johnson on August the 6th, 1965. And one of those who was present to witness the signing was Rosa Parks, a 52-year-old seamstress who 10 years earlier had refused to give up her seat on a bus in Alabama. And Miss Parks is a singular example of how many obstacles had to be overcome for African Americans to win their right to vote. She was forced to take a qualifying test, not once, but 3 times because of the intent of discrimination. And then, when she passed, the next obstacle was a poll tax of $1.50. It didn't seem like much, but black voters were required to pay it retrospectively, and so Rosa Parks had to pay $16.50, something that she said was a considerable amount of money. It's hardly surprising that this nation's first African-American president should pay homage to Rosa Parks last year when he went and sat inside the very bus in which that remarkable woman had refused to give up her seat, even as the right to protect the right to vote continues, almost 50 years after the Voting Rights Act was signed into law. And I'm delighted to say that joining us now is Democratic Congressman Elijah Cummings of Maryland. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, Martin.
Is the legacy over, or will Congress eventually honour the fight of Miss Parks and so many others?
I believe that Congress will. I was more pessimistic a few weeks ago, but I've seen the movement of people like John Lewis, Congressman Lewis, Congressman Sensenbrenner from the Republican side, my good friend, the whip, Mr. Clyburn, and others who are coming together, and there are others by the way, on the Senate side who are coming together to do what the Supreme Court said must be done, and that is to come up with a new formula and backing for it, for that Section 4 that they found unconstitutional. Let me say this. Rosa, you talked about Rosa Parks, Martin.
Yes.
She took, along with Martin Luther King and many others, took a moment and turned it into a movement. And I'm so afraid right now with that Shelby case, the Supreme Court, I think they pushed us back a good distance because we saw last year during the presidential election, we saw one of the greatest efforts to stop people from voting, people of color, students,
Congressman,
Hispanics.
you don't need to go back to last year, sir. Look at North Carolina today.
Right,
Look at
that's
Texas today.
That's exactly right. We need a Voting Rights Act more today than ever, because we see, and it's quite intentional. As soon as this decision was made, these folks came out and said, look, we're going to try to do now things that might have been prevented had the Supreme Court not done what it just recently did. So, and I applaud the Attorney General. I just don't think, Martin, that people are going to allow our democracy to go backwards. A lot of people thought with the last election that people would stay home or they'd be very, upset and they would, give up. But what happened is they took a negative and turned it into a positive, and that's why President Obama is president today.
Yes. Now, the president has just been in Arizona speaking,
yes.
And Arizona's Trent Franks, whom Heritage Action scores as the House's most conservative member, told Politico last month it's wise for the GOP to stay silent on the Voting Rights Act.
I think that's very unfortunate.
Isn't it that sort of thinking that's hurting that party's future prospects?
I certainly do. We are supposed to, as congressmen, to uphold the Constitution. And let me tell you, the very fiber of our Constitution is that right to vote. Not some privilege for a few, but for all of us. And so I'm very disappointed in that statement. But again, this is a moment that we've got to do what Rosa Parks did and turn it into a movement to reverse what the Supreme Court has done.
Indeed. Now, the president spoke about stagnant wages in this country earlier this hour. You are back home on August recess. You're hearing from your constituents. Don't today's wages speak to the need for an increase in the minimum wage, expanding the earned income income tax credit, securing more affordable health care, and upgrading the national infrastructure so that this vast disparity of wealth that we've just seen take off may be reduced and we may come together, as it were.
Martin, I could not agree with you more. My constituents, many of them have lost their jobs, and many of them who are working 2 or 3 jobs because they're not making the minimum wage. And some kind of way, we have got to help people stay in the middle class, and some of them get back into the middle class and stay there. And the only way we're going to be able to do it is do things like increasing the minimum wage and addressing the type of tax issues that you just mentioned. I was pleased with the president's speech. He spoke of us solving problems as opposed to scoring political points. Martin, we in the Congress, there's a lot of time spent by our Republican colleagues making political points when we're not doing for our constituents.
Congressman Elijah Cummings, thank you for not mentioning the name of Darrell Issa, and thank you, sir, for contributing this afternoon.
Thank you.
We'll be right back.